It's a serious situation, and we're concerned. We're concerned about this escalation. To be absolutely clear, we always will support sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries wherever their geographic location is.
For weeks, Ottawa stayed quiet. But tonight, that silence is gone. As Donald Trump escalates trade threats that could hit Canada next. Prime Minister Mark Carney has publicly raised alarm over what he called a troubling new surge in U.S. trade policy escalation, triggered by President Donald Trump's latest push to leverage tariffs against Canada's key allies and NATO partners. This development marks a rare moment in which Carney has stepped into the spotlight not merely as a negotiator or strategist, but as a direct voice of concern about how Washington's actions could affect Canada's economic and diplomatic standing. In a press conference in Doha, Qatar, where he was attending international discussions, Carney made clear that the recent wave of U.S. tariff threats, linked to Trump's broader ambitions involving Greenland and allied nations, represents more than a policy dispute. He said outright that Canada was concerned about this escalation. That comment was not casual. It was delivered amid a flurry of U.S. tariff announcements targeting countries that oppose Washington's aggressive push to take over Greenland, a self-governing Danish territory with strategic Arctic importance. Trump announced tariffs of at least 10%, rising to 25% over time, against Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland if they resist U.S. demands. It's a serious situation, and we're concerned. We're concerned about this escalation, to be absolutely clear, Carney told reporters. We always will support sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries wherever their geographic location is. That statement underscores a moment of tension that extends beyond Canadian trade alone. It reflects broader unease among Western nations about the use of tariffs not as economic tools, but as instruments of political coercion. European leaders have responded with a mixture of condemnation and organized resistance, warning that such unilateral tariff threats risk triggering a dangerous downward spiral in transatlantic relations. For Ottawa, the concern is both principle and practicality. Carney has been cautious not to escalate the rhetoric into outright confrontation, but his choice of words signals a break from diplomatic reticence that has often defined Canada's stance on U.S. policy differences. Instead of ducking the issue, he has put Canadian values front and center, emphasizing support for democratic sovereignty and collective security frameworks like NATO. Carney's public remarks also come at a time when Canada is navigating an increasingly complex global landscape in which economic and defense considerations are deeply intertwined. Canada's latest defense policy, which warns of Chinese and Russian ambitions in the Arctic, reflects an understanding that trade, security, and geopolitical strategy cannot be separated. But it is not just the Arctic that matters. Canada remains deeply connected to the United States economically, legally, and strategically. The U.S. is Canada's largest trading partner, accounting for a majority of exports, and both nations are bound by agreements like the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, CUSMA. In that context, criticisms of Washington's approach, especially from the leader of a neighboring country, carry weight. Carney's decision to call out what he views as an escalation should be seen in light of a series of tensions that have punctuated Canada-US economic relations in recent years. Trump's use of tariffs and trade threats has repeatedly rattled Canadian industries, from autos to agriculture, and has forced Ottawa to rethink long-standing assumptions about North American economic integration. In previous stages of the trade relationship, Canada responded to Trump's tariff threats by signaling that retaliation was possible, and Carney himself once described new U.S. tariff moves as a direct attack on Canadian workers and industries. Now, however, Carney is focusing on articulation of broader principles. By highlighting the risks posed by the current pattern, not only to Canada, but to long-standing alliances. He is framing the issue as one that cuts across traditional bilateral trade disputes into questions of global stability and cooperation. Carney's comments also reflect internal Canadian priorities. Those efforts are part of a longer-term strategy to protect Canada from sudden policy shifts in any single major economy. Yet this diversification effort does not mean Canada seeks to replace the U.S. as a partner. Carney has repeatedly emphasized that Canada supports its allies, and that disagreements over policy do not equate to hostility. His remarks make clear that Canada still values cooperation and mutual respect, even when interests diverge. What Canada fears, as voiced by Carney, is not competition, it is coercion. The Prime Minister stressed that decisions about Greenland, for example, belong to the people and government of Denmark, and that external economic threats should not determine sovereignty or political autonomy. That emphasis on self-determination resonates with Canada's own diplomatic culture, which has long balanced alliance commitments with respect for international law and multilateral cooperation. By publicly confronting the potential consequences of Washington's tariff strategies now, Carney is reminding the global community that Canada will defend its principles even when confronted by pressure from a powerful neighbor. At the same time, Canada is pragmatic about its defense and economic posture. Carney noted that Canada continues to work with NATO partners to enhance Arctic defense capabilities, indicating that economic disagreements need not undermine broader strategic alliances. Carney also hinted that if he and Trump meet later this year, perhaps at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, he will raise Canada's concerns directly and seek to bridge gaps through candid dialogue rather than confrontation. From Ottawa's perspective, the current situation underscores the evolving nature of U.S. leadership and its impact on allied relationships. Looked at from outside Canada, Trump's tariff threats, whether targeted at Europe or other partners, have drawn sharp criticism across the political spectrum, with European leaders arguing that they risk trade fragmentation and diplomatic rupture. Carney's role in this moment, therefore, is not simply that of a Canadian Prime Minister reacting to external pressures. He is positioning Canada as a voice for principled engagement and measured resistance to policies that may undermine long-term stability. In a world where economic tools are increasingly used as leverage in geopolitical disputes, Carney's clear articulation of concern, and his emphasis on alliance cohesion and sovereign rights, signals a Canada that is not passive in the face of escalation. And as the global stage shifts yet again, leaders in both Ottawa and Washington will be watching closely, not just for economic outcomes, but for the broader implications of a world in which even long-standing allies must navigate uncertainty, pressure, and competing visions for the future.